The Fringe First Awards were founded 50 years ago this year to encourage the presentation of new work on the Fringe. That's new plays, new writing, work that has been created specially for the Fringe. They were the idea of the then arts editor of the Scotsman, a wonderful man called Alan Wright, who had been part of the generation who reviewed Stoppard's Rosencrantz and Guildenstern when it first appeared on the Fringe in the 1960s, and was very excited by the idea of a play that went on to have such a huge global success premiering on the Fringe. So he thought that he would institute an award to encourage people to premiere brand new shows on the Fringe, and that was how the Fringe Firsts were born. So the shows which are eligible are basically theatre shows or shows with a strong theatrical element that are being done for the very first time, and they're only allowed to have had a very few previews wherever they come from before they arrive at the Fringe. So if I was to look back at some of them, I would think of Gregory Burke's Gagarin Way back around 2000, 2001. I would think of brilliant plays by David Gregg and by Steph Smith and by other really powerful Scottish playwrights who have gone on to have terrific careers, and also tremendous international work on the Fringe, because one of the slight variations to that central rule of the Fringe First being for new work is that if there's a brilliant international piece that has never been seen in the UK before and has only been around for a couple of years in its own country, then that too is eligible for a Fringe First. So I'll give one hugely vivid example, a show called Nastasia Filipovna at the Traverse in the late 1980s, which was just a fantastic piece of theatre by a Polish theatre company that was run by the great theatre and film director Andrzej Wajda, and I remember the vividness of that at the Traverse and the sense of the Iron Curtain opening up. One of the most conspicuous examples is Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I can remember nipping into the underbelly to see the first ever version of Fleabag, the 1 hour solo show that Phoebe performed there herself less than a decade ago, and I just remember seeing the huge response that was getting from audiences, particularly from young women in the audience, and I thought, well, this is not really my generation, but this woman is obviously really on to something. She's really striking a nerve here, and of course she has gone on to be a huge international star, both as a writer and as a performer, and she is now chair actually of the Fringe Society, supporting the Edinburgh Fringe in that role. Way back at the very beginning of the Fringe Firsts, I can remember this great generation of Hugh Laurie, Stephen Fry and Emma Thompson when they were students just emerging from university. They were in Fringe First winning reviews at that time. I remember Rowan Atkinson doing a show in what used to be the Wireworks. It was a huge sort of towering venue behind where the Fringe office is, and that was amazing, and almost every famous routine that people associate with Rowan Atkinson was already in that show way back in the late 1970s, and I can remember this huge response. So I mean, really the Fringe is a tremendous sort of breeding ground for big stars, and the boost that you can give to brilliant young companies at the start of their career is just such a thrill.
I'm Shona McCarthy. I'm the Chief Executive of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe Society. The Fringe Firsts have been such an important part of the development of the Fringe because they really give recognition to those emerging artists, people who may be bringing a show for the first time, and I think it's just so vital because everybody doesn't realise that the Fringe is one of those festivals where artists come in to bring work, are doing so at their own risk and very often finance in their own way at the Fringe. So the Fringe First being a recognition of work that's here for the first time, work from emerging artists, new experimental work, it's just been an absolutely crucial element of why artists want to come to the festival in the first place. The Fringe Firsts, in my opinion, are more important today than ever because you have artists and companies out there who may be preparing work over a year, 2 years, finessing it to bring it to the Fringe. And to have the recognition of a Fringe First, you've got Joyce McMillan, you've got these incredible people making the decisions, people who have enormous experience. So it brings with it a validation. It can also bring on a practical level, getting a Fringe First can mean that your show has an audience for the rest of the run. And the audience, not necessarily just punters, but also arts industry people who are coming to look for that new writing, that new talent, and the potential of onward life for the show. So winning a Fringe First can be an absolute accelerant to your Fringe journey. And if your objective is to have your talent recognised, to have a potential for your work being picked up and taken elsewhere, then having a Fringe First just makes a massive difference.
Thank you so much for the award. I love it.